let us dive in. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Bonard, we are a market intelligence and strategic development firm. We're specialized in the rented residential asset classes. So a little bit of a background, the company was established in 2007. We have been more than 10 years within the student housing sector. So we have 10 years of experience. And over the recent years, we've as well been incorporating the other rented residential asset classes, such as built to rent, senior living, co-living. We are based in Vienna. We have two offices in Europe, one branch in China, and we are currently now 91 specialists. We have done over 620 projects, such as location assessments, consultancies, different deliveries and analysis. We are covering over 250 geographies on the municipality level across Europe, Asia, Australia, Latin America, and Canada. Our main goal is to support our clients, leveraging our knowledge and our experience, also as well to support them through their investment processes, this being through our data and through our research. So without further ado, let us dive into the presentation. Let us explore as well and understand a little bit more in depth the Amsterdam market. So I would like to kindly welcome you all to this new session of Bonard's webinar series. This is dedicated to sharing our knowledge for the most sought after student housing markets within Europe. So the data and the insights that will be presented to you are based on Bonard's in-house data and our in-field research, also based on our conversations with local players, with key industry leaders. We have already previously covered Milan, Madrid, Warsaw, Lisbon, and Greater Paris, and now we will be talking about Amsterdam. So we hope that the following presentation and data will help you have a better understanding of this market, its dynamics as well, and it will serve you as a base for the subsequent panel. Okay, so let's firstly talk about the demand, right? So from the demand point of view, referring to student population within Amsterdam, we can see that the city is home to 29 universities and colleges. Out of these, 4 have a global ranking. So we have observed demand as a general trend, which has been showing an incremental growth over the years. And when talking about student population, we observe a positive trend in different types of students. So I would like to bring to attention the growth of international students, which is actually higher than the growth of student population. International students is growing around 12% over the years. Now, there are approximately 134,000 students in Amsterdam. Out of these, around 110,000 are domestic. So this makes approximately around 83% of the total student population. So within this total students as well, we've identified approximately 47% of them to be domestic mobile students. Now, what do I mean when we're talking about domestic mobile students? So domestic mobile students are basically, we're referring to all the students that are, in this case, native Dutch, but they travel or commute to the city of Amsterdam for their studies and they require a place to stay. Now, when also looking at this total student population, we have identified approximately 23,000, which are international. So this constitutes around the 17% of total student population. Now, should we talk about the student population in terms of the forecasted growth, we can see a consistent growth or trend over the next couple of years. So when we're talking or referring to this total student population, we're expecting, in fact, a consistent increase with an additional of nearly 20,000 students, which have been forecasted by the year 2026, 2027. Now, regarding international student population, there is also a same growth trend expected. This will be increasing from almost 23,000 students to a little over 32,000 as well in the 2026 and 2027 year. So now, based on these assumptions, it's clear that more living establishments shall be required. This in order to satisfy the growing demand from both the local and the international students. Now, moving on to the next slide. So now let's have a look and talk about the supply within this market. So there are currently 170 PBSA assets for student residences within the city. Now, these provide around 32,000 beds cumulatively. Now, the larger portion of the student housing accommodations are actually the non-private ones. So there are 140 of these residences now versus the 30 privately run. So this is, we could consider a significant difference in supply between the private and the non-private stock. Now, in terms of beds or capacity, though, 140 non-private residences, they operate a little over 21,000 beds. Now, whilst on the other hand, the 30 private residences, they're operating almost 11,000 beds. So we can then see that the private sector constitutes the smaller amount of larger capacity residences. So with around 18% of the supply, which is accommodating approximately 1/3 of the total bed capacity within the city. Now, from the map, we can see the distribution of the private PBSAs versus the non-private ones. So regarding this map, it's worth to mention that due to the difficulties to find suitable or to find plots within the city center, the private stock is now developing. It's hard to find within the downtown. So this is why the new private establishments are located in more remote areas of the city or expanding towards the outskirts of it. Now, when speaking about the competitive environment of supply, most of the private PBSA market in Amsterdam is in fact dominated by brands which have multiple locations, some Dutch brands and others that are spread across Europe. Now, within the beds offered by the private sector, the majority of currently operational private stock is covered by 3 brands, which constitutes over 50% of the private provision. So we can see that the student experience has around 21%. Our domain or our campus has 17%, and then Holland to Stay with 14%. Now, it is important to mention that according to the current projects in pipeline, there will be major changes in the market. Shares, especially with Zero Student Housing and the Plaza Resident Services, which want to make it into the top 4 brands. Now let us move on to the next slide. So in this next slide, once we're talking about the PBSA market structure, it's important to highlight that the Amsterdam PBSA is broken down into various types of assets with different capacities. However, we've observed that the average bed capacity is higher within private PBSA versus the non-private PBSA assets. This is with 379 beds in private on average versus 183 beds in public stock on average. Now, the majority of private assets, as we can see, have in between 100 to 299 beds. The second biggest has between 300 to 499 beds, and the remaining is for the assets with 500 plus beds. Now, if we look at the public sector, which is differently distributed, this has more accommodations with less than 100 beds. This is the highest one, when this constitutes the majority of the stock. This is followed by the assets with 100 to 299 beds. Afterwards, we can see those with a capacity of 300 to 499 beds. And finally, the lowest percentage is for those assets that have over 500 beds. So in conclusion, then, we could say that the private stock is newer than the non-private. We see a clear pattern that the bigger size assets are for those newer private assets. And now it is hard to find schemes with less than 100 beds for those in pipeline when we're referring to the new private stock. This is just an extra point to add to this slide. Now let's talk a little bit about the future PBSA stock within Amsterdam. This is over the next couple of years. So it is expected that there will be approximately 15% growth in bed capacity over the next 3 years. we can see that the nearly 4,800 beds will be introduced into the markets. This is by the end of 2026, of which more than half are planned to be added by private operators. Now, the private side includes brands such as Plaza Student, resident services. We have as well Zero Student Housing. These are the ones that will have the most expansion. Now, regarding the non-private sector, we see that the largest investor within future growth is Leaving the Key, with 7 new buildings that are set to open by 2026. So apart from this list, Bonard tracks over much more projects within pipeline, but due to the presentation, we're not able to include all of them. All right, so this next slide, when we're breaking down student populations and bed ratios, well, we can see that the total provision rate in 2023 is 24.1%. This means that basically regarding the total current provision rate, the market is slowly approaching a saturation level. Now, should we consider the projected student growth over the next couple of years, as well as the projects that are in the pipeline and they're growing, there should be a big chance expected within the total provision rate. There's no big change really expected. Now, when considering the private provision rate, which is 12.8%, well, this indicates that the private PBSAs are undersupplied. So this is compared to the EU industry standard, which is between 15 to 20%. Now, considering there are 7 private residences in the pipeline with opening dates by 2026, and which will be introducing to approximately 2.6 thousand beds, as well as a forecasted increase in international student numbers, well, then provision rate will rise only slightly over the next couple of years. So in conclusion, we could say that considering the private provision rate, we can say that the market will need indeed more private constructions going forward. This in order to basically accommodate the growing student population. Okay, so the following slide refers to the monthly rental levels. Now, when talking about rents, based on our collection of data for various room offerings, we can see overall the biggest gap between average rents charged in the private versus the public accommodations is for the 1-bedroom apartments. You can see that the average of 1,384 versus 613 euros. And also the next biggest gap is for the single en-suites. So as we can see, this is an average of slightly over 1,100 euros versus 430 euros. Now, we can also observe in this table that the smallest average difference between private and non-private establishments are the single studios. This is between 911 euros versus the 596, right, which is on average. Now, the single rooms are currently not on offer within private establishments. Now, if we would benchmark the private rental market on monthly average rents for the single studios, including utilities as well within the rent, we can see that the price is of around 1,700 euros, which actually still remains higher than the average rent for the different room offerings within student accommodations of PBSAs. Now, looking at this next slide, when we're comparing the average adjusted monthly rents is between single studios in different cities, we can see that the higher priced private PBSA establishments are in Amsterdam and Copenhagen, Copenhagen being the highest one. This is compared to other European capital cities. Now, when also looking at this breakdown of average monthly rents, the high price difference between the private and the non-private sectors, which we can see within Amsterdam, is due, and as well the big difference between rents is because of the privates being more expensive, but however, they provide a wider and a much richer amount of amenities. So now let's talk a little bit more about the services and amenities which are offered by the PBSA assets. This is when comparing once again private and the non-private. So based on our breakdown of amenities, we can see that there is a clear and considerable difference in terms of facility offerings. Now, the pricing is also playing a clear difference, playing as well a role within the private rooms, which are more expensive. But we can see that the non-private PBSAs, even though have the largest number of assets within the city of Amsterdam, the amount of amenities on offer is actually very low. So for all players, basically, that will be entering the market with new private construction, it's clear that then a wider variety of facilities will be attracting more tenants. This is considering the current market offering, of course. And just as a conclusion, we see, in fact, a much richer amount of services and amenities for the new projects. And this is in order to attract more tenants and, of course, to stay more competitive within this market. So this next slide will just basically give us a benchmark for other popular student cities in the Netherlands. We thought it would be a good comparison point when it comes to student populations, so PBSA beds as a total and offered by private operators, provision rate, and also as key indicator. So we can see that Amsterdam, in fact, has the highest student population compared to Rotterdam, Utrecht, and Groningen, as well as the highest share of international students and total PBSA beds. 1/3 of these are part of the private sector. Now, Groningen is the city with a high share of international students. Apologies. So this is a city with a high share of international students, which also has a 17%. However, it has the lowest provision rate of these cities with only 10%. So having a higher provision rate of 24%, the occupancy rate of the PBSA establishments within the city of Amsterdam is high, but this also indicates a clear room for private stock to grow within the city. So this is a positive view that we have, that there would be quite indeed a growth for the city. Okay, so as we have previously covered in the presentation, Amsterdam constitutes an interesting and a strong market for PBSAs. It is a market with one of the highest PBSA beds compared to other capital cities. It is, in fact, the market with the highest provision rate when compared to other markets previously covered. So we hope you have found value in the data and the research that we have collected and we are presenting now. So let us jump to our awaited panel discussion with the key market leaders. We will engage in a fruitful discussion on the Amsterdam market. So I will now leave the floor for our guest speakers to introduce themselves, and then we can proceed with the panel discussion. So perhaps maybe Kostas, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, David, and thank you for inviting me to your panel today. My name is Kostas. I'm a senior director at Greystar in Central Europe. I cover the Austria, Germany, and Netherlands market for Greystar. For those of you who don't know Greystar, we are a vertically integrated investment management, development management, and operations company. We operate more than 800,000 units and beds globally, with 69 billion of US dollars assets under management across various strategies and various geographies. We entered the Dutch market back in 2013, and we've experienced a very positive business environment. We've grown our business a lot. We currently operate about 5,000 units in the Netherlands, as well as we have another 3,000 units under development, with a strong focus in student housing and young professionals, as well as multifamily. And yeah, we look forward to growing our business in the Netherlands, especially in the student housing sector. So happy to be on the panel today to discuss the market.
Thank you very much, Kostas, for joining as well. Warm welcome to you. Now, Yuri, if you would care to introduce yourself.
Thanks, David. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Yuri, and I'm head of rented residential at Bonard. David had the chance to introduce our company, so I'll be concise. So Bonard is the research and advisory firm. We are focused on alternative asset classes such as student housing, build to rent, co-living, serviced apartments, senior living. Yeah, we deliver data and market insights just to support strategic decision making of developers, operators, investors, and also government bodies. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the introduction, for us to know you a little bit more. So I guess based on the awaited panel discussion, let us dive in. So I think the first question I would like to ask Kostas. So what factors make Amsterdam and the Netherlands an attractive location for investors, do you think?
Yeah, great. So, I mean, let me try and answer this question, like just from a Greystar perspective, at least. I mean, we are a foreign company that moved here, so we went through all this process a while ago. Look, I think number one, and that applies, I think, to any business entering a new country, is having a steady business environment with a strong and reliable regulatory and legal framework that can give you certainty on how you can plan your investments, in the coming years. And Netherlands does offer that. The past year has been a bit shaky. We had a couple of curveballs with a change in the point system and some changes in the taxes. But I think once the dust settles on this, I think we will be again back to a new normal where we can plan ahead for our investments, with a 5 and 10 year horizon. So number one, I would say strong regulatory and the business environment. Then, secondly, maybe putting my development hat on a little bit. I think the Netherlands offers a clear zoning and permit regime for student housing, better than in other markets. I'm not going to say it's a perfect system because it takes ages. So if you ask me things that don't work really well, I can come to that later, but at least it's clear. And then secondly, on the development side, the Netherlands offers a really good development ecosystem, right? So for us to do our business, we need to find strong and reliable partners, right? We cannot do everything by ourselves. We need strong contractors, architects, engineers, people to partner with. And Netherlands has a very strong companies with which we can work and develop our product. And I guess last thing, specifically again on the PBSA market, of course, our market grows if the students are happy and the students keep growing, right? So Netherlands has very strong universities, outward-looking universities. They attract international talent. So we see that growing a lot in the past years, and we're confident it will keep growing. So that gives us the confidence as well that can come in and expand our business here. At the same time, very low supply. The demand supply imbalance is huge. We like to be part of the solution in that, and help solve the problem by developing more properties. So to sum up, steady business environment, strong development ecosystem, and a positive student market effectively.
Great. Thank you very much, Kostas. Very interesting set of points. This as well exactly helps us understand a little bit more how it is that then the Netherlands is indeed an attractive country for developments and for growth within PBSA. So Yuri, I'll ask you the next question. So Amsterdam, as we've seen, is a fast developing PBSA market. So how does it perform compared to other capital cities across Europe?
Well, yeah, David, you're right. It's one of the fastest developing PBSA markets in Europe, although it's not the biggest one. If I remember correctly, the average growth rate of international students in the city is the highest compared to other capital cities in Europe. Just as you showed, it stands at 12% yearly, which is an outstanding number in my opinion. For example, Greater London features just 10% increase yearly, and Berlin stands at 5% increase. So in this regard, the market is very attractive because this growth is constituted by students with a really high purchasing power. When it comes to the supply, Amsterdam is ramping up the PBSA stock, both private and non-private, relatively quickly. I think it's just a reflection of strong market fundamentals, which drive investors and motivate them to develop new establishments in the city. Now Amsterdam records the highest total provision rate compared to other capitals. Now it stands at 24%. For example, the provision rate in London is around 20%, and Berlin features the provision rate a bit higher, if I remember it correctly, around 10%. It doesn't mean that there is no room for PBSA supply to grow in Amsterdam. I would say that it's exactly opposite. As it was shown on some of your slides, the provision rate of private PBSA beds stands at 13%. So it means that the private stock is still insufficient. And maybe the last point from my side, recently we did the comparison of European capitals in terms of the numbers of PBSA beds in the pipeline. And I believe that only London and Paris have much more beds in the pipeline compared to Amsterdam. And despite being a much smaller city than, for example, Rome, Warsaw, Madrid, also Prague, Berlin, Amsterdam records more than 6,000 beds in pipeline. So in comparison, much bigger Madrid has around 5,000 only, and Rome even less, around 1,500, something like that. So all it points to the really healthy demand and the still existing room to grow for new private PBSA developments in the city.
Great, thank you very much, Judy. It's very interesting to see, indeed, as you've mentioned, how international student and overall student population is growing compared to other capital cities. I think as well for many of the guests today joining the session, it's a bit of a relief to know that the Amsterdam market it still has room for growth. So Kostas, let me go back to you. Do you see any peculiarities of the student housing market within the Netherlands and Amsterdam, of course, from an investor's perspective, which make it different than other student housing markets in Europe?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing that comes to mind, although it's now second nature to me, is the point system that we have to use in the Netherlands, to calculate our rents. Student housing is typically regulated, so to calculate your rents, effectively you have to follow the point system. And when you try to explain that to outsiders, it's a little bit of a headache, where you have to say, hey, look, we need the kitchen to be 1.21 meters long in order to make sure we get all the points, or we need to count the tiles in the bathroom to maximize the points and optimize the rent. So I think like the point system is kind of the first thing that comes to mind. I like it as an approach. After a while, when you get used to it, it's great, but explaining it to outsiders is a bit of a hassle, and we spend a lot of dinner conversations on it, but it is what it is. I think the other peculiarity is, not really a peculiarity, it is the market, but we find that the demand supply imbalance here is just orders of magnitude higher than in our other markets. So when we are reporting, in our greater European kind of meetings, our lease-up performance in the Netherlands, and we tell people that, hey, we opened this asset and it was leased over a weekend, and that we have 4,000 people in the waiting list. It attracts odd looks because everyone else is trying really hard, spending a lot of money in marketing and leasing to try and fill in their assets, and we lease them over a weekend. So that's also an interesting kind of difference to other markets. Basically, there's no leasing risk in the projects we do in the Netherlands. And I would say the last thing I would note is what we've tried in the Netherlands as Greystar, when we don't do it in other markets yet, but we plan to do it, is we've managed to mix students and young professionals in the same buildings, and it's been a very interesting mix. We find that they create a nice community. You might have students who graduate and they want to stay for a year or two in the property before they move out to another building. And it's been very successful. People love it, and it's something we probably also want to try and do in other markets as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing. Now, Kostas, let me stay with you still now. You talked at the beginning of what are the factors that make basically Amsterdam and the Netherlands attractive. Now I want to flip the question. So what do you think are the hurdles to invest within this market?
Yeah, look, I mean, for the last year, it's been a bit difficult with a few changes that happened, in the regulatory system. I mean, it's okay if these changes happens once in a while, but I think it helps if there is a bit more communication in order to be able for us to plan ahead our investments. Anyway, I do hope this, the dust will settle and we'll get back to a more stable kind of, business environment in the coming year. The second one is definitely the zoning and permitting process in the Netherlands. It's a very time-consuming process, and it is subject to a lot of, to a complicated objections regime where people can object in different stages. So, it makes it can make the zoning and permitting process very unpredictable. And in a time where we need to build new homes and new, student housing, I feel like a more efficient and streamlined zoning and permitting process is going to help, both the developers and the end users, right? Because in the end of the day, we want to build homes. Students want to live in our properties. We just want to find an efficient way to get there. Right now, we have about 2,000 units in land plots that we own. We haven't built them out yet. We own the land plots. We have the money to build them out, but we're not building them yet because the permitting and zoning process is just taking a bit too long. And I understand that part of it is also because the municipalities are under a lot of pressure, right? They have resourcing is a problem everywhere. So we appreciate part of it is to be expected, but we hope we can find ways to get to zoning and permits faster, because that also gives more confidence to international investors to kind of invest earlier on in projects rather than come only after the permits are in place.
Great set of points, Kostas. Very interesting to see like the other side of the coin then for this market. Now, Judy, I wanted to ask you the following one. So as was shown during the presentation, the number of international students is growing very fast, and is just set or expected to grow going forward over the next couple of years. Do you see any changes in the sources of origin for international students? What will you think be the most important factor which will drive the influx of these international students?
Thanks, David. Yeah, indeed. The breakdown of students by country of origin is changing in Amsterdam. And I would say that it's typical for all other European capital cities, not only for Dutch ones. Now I see that, for example, Germany is the key market for international students in Amsterdam. The share of German students equals around quarter of the total international students in the city. And other countries contribute much less than Germany. Yeah, alongside German students, we see that Italy, Romania, and China are relatively active senders of their students to the city. However, German students outnumber the ones from these countries even combined. So what is interesting is that I see much faster increase in the number of students from within EU countries compared to the inflow from non-EU. As I said, the share of origins of international students is changing all the time. However, I would mention Italy and China now. So these two countries, they have shown really steady growth over the last years in terms of the number of students sent to Amsterdam. Especially this is the case for Italy, which almost tripled the number of students in the city over the last 5 years. And also it's interesting that the presence of students from the UK deteriorates in Amsterdam. I think that it's very likely as a result of Brexit. No other country has shown such a large, decline in the last years. I think as a result of Brexit, British students are now considered non-EU, and as a result, they should pay fee as for non-EU students, and they are usually much higher. When it comes to your question concerning the major drivers of international students in the future, I think there is a consensus that the numbers will be growing steadily. I think that the development of English taught programs will be the key contributor. We already see a decline in the number of Dutch-only programs in the city, and I think this trend will keep up. Even now, if I remember it correctly, around 80% of programs in research universities, I mean in local Dutch universities, are offered exclusively in English. Yeah, and also it's visible that the Dutch government applied several policies designed to make higher education institution education more accessible to internationals, and even specific attention is paid to offering sort of policy guidance to the local universities on how to manage the flow of international students. So I think it's fair to expect a growing number of international students in the coming years. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rudy. It's very interesting that you mentioned all the different approaches and all the shifts that are related to the student population, especially international ones. So this, I think, as well, as you mentioned, is contributing to the growth of this market. Now, I would like to talk a little bit more about student preferences. So, Kostas, can you share with us your opinion concerning what you've seen, the student preferences within the Netherlands? So how do you incorporate them into your developments and your overall strategy?
Sure, yeah. And look, let me maybe start by saying that, as I mentioned in the beginning, Greystar is a vertically integrated company, right? So we are involved in the entire value chain of real estate. We design the buildings, we build them, and then we operate them, right? So we can see how what we developed also is put in practice, and then we take the lessons learned, and then we move them back to the design for the next project. So you know, my answer about student preferences is going to be a snapshot of where we are today, but it is an evolving process. So look, I mean, if we go back to when the student housing in Europe started growing, right? You know, let's say 2010 onwards. You know, back then most student housing was quite basic in Europe, also in the Netherlands. You know, like you'd have like small room, old furniture, shared bathroom, shared kitchen. You know, pretty basic offering. You know what we have. And that's where I lived as a student as well, by the way. So I think what we've seen in the past years is that students are willing to pay a bit more in order to have a better product, more privacy, but also a more of a community feel in the property where they're staying at. So, you know, how have we factored this in our projects? First, we provide private rooms, you know, small rooms, but with their own kitchen and their own bathroom. So students can have their own like private little kind of ward in there where they can, you know, be by themselves. But we offer a lot of also communal spaces. So you know, we have co-working spaces where people can go and study together, or study rooms where, you know, where they don't need to stay in their room. They go down there, they sit down with their other friends, and they all study together. We offer like a cinema room where people can go in and watch movies or sports events, you know, or like have a movie night every Friday where, you know, maybe we throw in the free drinks, people watch the movies, and we create like nice events. We have like nice roof terraces, which are really well used. You know, like every building has a roof. Not everyone uses it, but it's one of the nicest areas if you want to go back, you know, go up there. So we have like almost like roof gardens in all our properties where you know, people can go in and enjoy effectively the rooftop experience. We offer gyms. Gyms are also very well used, so that's included usually in the price that people pay. So all in all, this helps create, you know, a nice community. It's not just the offering of, hey, you have all these extra things, but it's actually the experience where, you know, by living in our property, you make friends. This creates a stickiness factor. Like people like to keep staying there even after they graduate. That's what we see, and I think that's kind of the magic sauce that we found keep things together. Now, is it going to be like that forever? You know, who knows? I think things will keep moving, and we need to keep adjusting. But I think at this stage, this is kind of what we find works best.
Thank you very much for sharing, Kostas. Indeed, I think that, as you mentioned, it, to create this sort of sense of community is essential, right? So this is why as well we see a lot of the amenities include very communal areas, so communal kitchen or terraces, so that then this kind of sense of community is strengthened, and it creates or generates a little bit more attractiveness towards the projects.
Yeah, but maybe just one point, because what's important also is to keep it affordable, right? And all these extras sound like really expensive, but the way we make it work is by having scale as well. So a lot of our properties are more than 300 apartments. We have some properties that are over 1,000 apartments, and this number sounds big, but when you walk in our properties, it doesn't give you the feeling that it's just a massive building. We design them very carefully, and we create this sense of shared spaces that effectively mitigates the scale, but we are able to share all these costs amongst a very large number of rooms effectively. So affordability is also important to keep in mind.
Thank you very much, Kostas. So perhaps I'll take a question from the chat. Now that we're talking a little bit more in terms of the projects and feasibility and similar. So I think this question would be good. So to what extent do we feel that new regulations, higher interest rates, exit deals, expansions are putting new PBSA developments at risk, do you think? So do we think that is it still feasible under current market conditions to develop PBSAs in the Netherlands?
Yeah, maybe I'll have the first stab at it because it's my job. So to develop PBSA in the Netherlands. Look, I mean, indeed, right now, if you ask me which part of the value chain is in a squeeze, it's the development part, right? Because with the rising inflation, we've seen rising in base rates, we see, which leads to a rise in financing costs. So financing costs for developments have gone up. Then construction costs for development have gone up. At the same time, rents in student housing are regulated, so it's not like rents can increase that much. And this creates effectively like a squeeze where many projects are not feasible anymore, right? So right now, it is indeed difficult to make new developments pencil in. If you just stick to, the old world, as we call it, numbers, right? There needs to be more collaboration between sellers and buyers. There needs to be pricing adjustments in order to make development projects work again. And it's kind of our day-to-day battle. Now, there are two ways to try and approach that. Either you just don't do anything and wait for the prices to go down in order to do new developments. I think a lot of people will be doing that. What we try to do is work with the sellers or with the developers to try effectively and optimize their projects a little bit, Greystarize them, as we like to say, in order for us to be able to pay them a bit more, like in order to help them also with the pressures they are experiencing. So and we find that this has helped us effectively save some deals that otherwise they couldn't progress. So just very, very simple example I can give you is typically municipalities require us to provide a lot of parking spaces, right? Parking spaces are usually underground, they're quite expensive. But we do have experience in our own student properties where we provided all these car parking spaces, but no one used them, right? And we have evidence of that now. So what we can do is we can go to the municipalities and say, hey guys, look, this is going to cost us like X million to provide, but no one uses them. So why don't we find the middle ground where we reduce our parking spaces, we save some money, we can put that money in use and provide more regulated student housing. So like having these discussions now is a bit more necessary than it was a year ago. So that's kind of at least how we are trying to approach the difficult feasibility question, because it is an issue right now, making deals pencil in.
And then perhaps another follow-up question now, since we're talking about zoning laws and permits. So do you currently how strict are they when it comes to having mixed schemes, so to students and young professionals?
Some allow it, some don't. That's the simple answer. It's very clear. Like some municipalities support to have the mix. Some of them, when they give you a permit, might tell you, hey, look, we want this to be 100% student. We are happy with both. We like the mix. We can also operate standalone, but it's usually a pretty clear upfront discussion with the municipality.
Thank you very much, Kostas. Because we were talking about a little bit in the services and the amenities being offered, I would like to kind of address one of the questions towards Yuri. So how does the micro location dynamics in Amsterdam kind of work? And also, what would you consider sort of a tolerable commuting time for students?
Thanks, David. Yeah, micro-location is a key for development of new PBSA schemes. So first, students value, a good, friendly environment. So, but I would say that the key is the distance toward the closest universities where they study in. For example, we deployed several in-field surveys, and also we had a communication with both operators and students. And yeah, we identified that the tolerable commute time stands at 30-40 minutes from the student residence to the university. Yeah, and I think that this is exactly the distance majority of developers and investors are looking for when they are planning to establish a new PBSA schemes in any cities, not only in Amsterdam.
Yuri, thank you very much. All right, gentlemen. So we've covered a little bit more about the market and similar. Perhaps let's touch a little bit more in terms of the financial situation. Kostas, you've mentioned a few very interesting points. So I would probably forward you the next question. So how do you think inflation has impacted the current situation on the student housing market within Amsterdam and the Netherlands overall?
Sure. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, to be honest, I don't think I can tell you much more on inflation that you haven't heard already from the experts in the last year, right? So I'll try to keep it almost like to my day-to-day job, in case that's a bit more useful to the audience. I'm definitely not as smart as a lot of the economists and the research experts who have given their opinions on the matter, right? But I mean, let me try to walk you through my thoughts basically on three different principles. First, from an investor and owner perspective, then secondly, from a developer, and third, from a student perspective as well. So I think on the investor owner side of things, what we see as an owner is, for high quality assets, obviously the inflation creates a problem because our OPEX goes up and our exit cap rate assumptions also go up, which affects our valuation. On the other hand, we see that effectively balanced out by the rent growth, which has been very strong, and we think will keep being strong together with inflation. So overall, we feel quite comfortable, at least for the high quality assets that we own, that inflation, is not going to be a big issue. Now, on the development side, I'm not going to repeat myself because it's the same kind of points I mentioned earlier. Because of inflation, costs have gone up, financing costs have gone up. There is a feasibility squeeze, right? So there is pain there, making development deals stack up. And in the end, I think it just needs probably land values to take a hit to absorb that. And then thirdly, from a student perspective, right? Because we need to make sure we don't forget the students. The students are our customers, right? We like to provide them a nice experience, and we need them to be happy. Now, the students are not usually the most, the group in society that has the highest willingness to pay for things, right? They prefer to spend their money on drinks and going out and having fun rather than on their rent or even their food. So we need to be careful that, they are not going to get squeezed too much by the cost of living increases, because in the end of the day, they need to be able to afford the rent. Right now we're in a situation where the undersupply is so big that, it doesn't affect our leasing, but we cannot be complacent to that. We need to make sure students are not going to be too much, priced out effectively because of the cost of life increase. And we all hope inflation is going to be back in order soon.
If I may comment, sorry, here from the students' perspective, last year we issued a research paper dedicated to the PBSA rent increase across Europe, and recently we did the same exercise for the countries as well. So fortunately now we can compare the rent change over the last several years, not only in Amsterdam but in other cities as well. Yeah, and what we see actually reflects the general inflation trend in Europe. It's no surprise. So it's slowing down, and this trend is followed by PBSA rents as well. For example, in 2021-2022 academic year, local providers struggled with rising utility costs and other operational expenses, so they had to pass this at least partially onto the tenants. So we witnessed around 7% in the PBSA rental growth in Amsterdam. Here I mean the rents of private providers. And also more or less the same increase we observed in the Netherlands on average. I would say that it's worth mentioning that the PBSA rent growth was way higher in Eastern European countries where the PBSA rents skyrocketed by 15 or even 20% over the year. And this year, the operators continued increasing PBSA rents. It's no surprise because the inflation and key costs are rising as well. But when the announced rents for the 2023 fall season will be, I mean, in Amsterdam, will be 5% higher compared to the previous year. Hence, I would confirm that the rental growth in the PBSA sector is slowing down. Yeah, and I think that the demand for student housing in Amsterdam is so strong amid the undersupply that operators don't record any shortage of tenants because of permanent growth in rents. Even opposite, the undersupply of private stock and the growing student population keep the occupancy rate very high. So we estimate it at around 95% on Amsterdam market.
Yuri, thank you very much. Very interesting to see how the rents are playing an important role, and as well while we are looking at the overall growth in different cities. Kostas, is very interesting the way you explain to us through the various perspectives to understand a little bit more in terms of how it's essential to kind of find this balance and to sort of have this seamless or a very important, powerful synergy to make these projects attractive. Now, Yuri, let me ask you a question. So overall, there is a general sense that transaction activity on the PBSA market has slowed down in the recent year. So what trends then do you see in the PBSA market in Amsterdam and of course the Netherlands in general terms of investments?
Yeah, you're right. We see the transaction activity is cooling down for sure. By the way, we see the same trend across other European markets as well. So the number of deals and the average deal value decreased for sure, at least over the last 2 years. There are two obvious reasons. The first one is pandemics, right? But the impact of this factor is waning. And the second one is global turbulence, macroeconomic instability, which makes the market environment very uncertain. So it's no surprise that market players are cautious and trying to eye markets rather than buying portfolios. There are really strong socio-economic fundamentals behind the student housing market in Amsterdam. We told about this, and which we just talked about. A growing number of students, like insufficient supply, higher purchasing power of the majority of students. Hence, indeed, once the global uncertainty comes to an end, hopefully soon, then it's fair to expect that revival of investment activity in Amsterdam, where we see around 7 brands with portfolios and in the country in general.
Thank you for sharing, Yuri. Now, I'm being aware of time. We're getting close to the end, so I would like to ask the next question to Kostas. What are your expectations regarding the investment outlook for the rest of 2023 and 2024?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as you guys said already, activity in the first half of the year was pretty low in terms of transactions, but it's been one of my busiest 6 months, analyzing and underwriting deals. So I think there is a lot of work happening right now. There's still like price exploration. There is still a lot of work trying to make deal works. They don't currently, a lot of them don't make it through the finish line yet, but I think we could see a few of them moving ahead in the second half of the year. As long as I think seller expectations also kind of adjust a little bit to the new world that we're facing. But I think my personal view is that probably it's not going to be until next year where we see a proper kind of pickup in activity.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kostas. Yuri, would you care to add anything in terms of what are expectations regarding the investment outlook?
Yeah, I agree with Kostas. So probably next year, and as I said, once everything is settled, especially with macroeconomic instability, we expect that the number of deals and investment activity will speed up just because of the plenty of portfolios, right, and the big interest of investors from outside of the country. So yeah, it's fair to expect that probably in the next several years we'll see much more transactions with current portfolios from the outside of the country.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think we're almost out of time. So firstly, I would like to thank our panel. Gentlemen, we appreciate your time today. Kostas, it was very interesting to hear your perspectives as well. Yuri, thank you very much for sharing your points of views regarding the evolution, the growth and potential for the Amsterdam market and for the Netherlands overall. So we would like to, we really do appreciate your time today. And also I would like to thank all the people that have joined the webinar. We hope that you have enjoyed and found usefulness and also some good insights that we have been discussing and providing. So just to as well mention that the presentation and the recording shall be shared upon completion of the webinar. We hope you all have a great day. We hope to be able to talk and to interact soon. And please do not forget to reach out to us should you have any further questions or you're interested to have in a little bit more of a more specific discussion with PBSAs or a particular market. We'll be more than happy to. So thank you once again to everyone for joining, and I wish you all a pleasant day.
Thank you all, and also I appreciate we didn't answer all the Q&A. So personally, happy to for people to reach out and follow up on any of these questions. Some pretty good questions there, but worth a follow up. Thank you, guys.
Indeed.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.